Hello, my name is Matt Wheeler, coming to you from Mount Joy, Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County, and I'm glad to be with you for Fieldmoot 2023. In this session, I'll be sharing songs from my new album, A Hard History of Love. The song is based on a series of short stories by Wendell Berry, and Wendell Berry is honestly my favorite living author. And for those of you who don't already know who Mr. Berry is, he is a farmer and poet and author, and he's an activist, and he's been writing for decades. He's been publishing books for about 60 years, and he's still alive. He lives in Henry County, Kentucky, and so he writes essays and poetry, but he also writes fiction, and that's my favorite genre that he writes in. He writes based on the series of characters from this community called Port William, this rural Kentucky community that's based on his real life hometown of Port Royal, Kentucky. And that's what this album is focused on. This is focused on 5 short stories from the many, many stories that Berry has written about Port William. To give you some sense, Berry wrote the first of the Port William stories in 1960. It was a novel called Nathan Coulter. And he wrote his most recent one, that's been published at least, in 2022. It's called How It Went. He's 89 currently. And what's really, one, it's amazing to be writing for 6 decades, but to be writing with such coherence. He writes about this community, and it's so layered. You meet these different characters, like in the novel Jaber Crow. Jaber is the main character in the novel named after him. He's the narrator. It's autobiographical for his character, and it's the community from his perspective. But then he's a side character in most of the other stories. And you see a lot of that. You get to know characters, and then it makes it that much richer when you see them in other roles and other parts of their lives. And that part brings me to the setting for this first song. The first song is based on a short story called The Hurt Man. And in the story, the 2 main characters, besides the hurt man who is nameless in this, are Matt Feltner and his mom, Nancy Feltner. In most of the Port William stories, many of them at least, Matt is one of the rememberers of his community. He's an old man, but in this particular story, he's 5 years old and he's home with his mom. He is the only surviving child of Nancy and Ben Feltner, and Ben is out of town, Matt's dad. And it's a Saturday afternoon, and he and his mom are sitting out on the porch, Matt and his mom, Nancy. And what happens is, they're around the outskirts of town, this little rough and tumble town, and a fight breaks out. And a bloodied man bursts from the crowd and starts heading toward their house. And Matt isn't quite sure what's going to happen. He figures maybe he thinks they're going to hide. He's not sure. But what happens is the man runs right up onto their porch, and Mrs. Feltner lets him into the house. And then, in a more stunning move even, some men are coming after the bloodied man, and she blocks the door. We don't know for sure how well the Feltners knew these people, but it's a small town, so maybe they did know them. Point is, they all go inside, and Matt is struck by 2 different things. He's struck by his mom's tenderness in the midst of her sorrow. She wears black because she's lost 3 of her kids, so she's in mourning. But she shows such tenderness in the middle of a mess. And there's also the fact that it dawns on Matt that the young man is not, that the hurt man, I mean to say, is not going to die right then. He's not that badly wounded. He's pretty hurt, but he's not mortally wounded. But it occurs to him that loss is a category, that one day the man would die, that his 3 siblings who had all passed away, and he'd seen their gravestones, they were real people too. And so he's struck by this darkness shot full of light, as I put it in the song, but he's also struck by his mom's tenderness in the midst of it. It's a really formational moment for him. In 11 pages, Wendell Berry basically teaches a masterclass in how to capture a moment. So I recommend checking out the story. It's called The Hurt Man. It's from a collection called That Distant Land, which is the inspiration material for all the songs on this album. And this is a song called A Hard History of Love which is a wonderful phrase that comes from the story. So here it is. This is called A Hard History of Love. In tenderness, she leaned into the hurts of this whole hurt world. In tenderness, she dressed the wounds of this bleeding neighbor, the hurt man, the look of all things badly hurts. In the black of her mourning, for the three she had lost before, she restored. Oh, and this was a part of a country of trust, and this was a part, a membership of flesh and blood, and this was a part, and belonged to the deliverance of a hard history of love. In wonderment, her little boy looked on and knew what he would learn all his life. In wonderment, he felt the love and loss and cost of a darkness shot through with light. In the black of her mourning, for the three she had lost before, she restored. Oh, and this was a part of a country of trust, and this was a part, a membership of flesh and blood, and this was a part, and belonged to the deliverance of a hard history of love, a hard history of love, a hard history of love. Hey, if you tuned into my Fieldmoot session from 2022 called Lewis, Tolkien, and Berry in Song, you might have recognized that. Or even if you backed the Kickstarter for the album, then you probably did. If you did, thank you. So that one is called A Hard History of Love. And it's the stories, there's 23 stories in the collection, That Distant Land, and that's the very earliest one, set in 1888. So take them chronologically. It's not the first 5 stories in the book, but it's the 5 of them are in the order that the dates happen, if that makes sense. So moving along to the second tune. This one's called The Ballad of Tall and Minnie. So the context for this is set in 1908. So, several years later, and this introduces 2 of the most beloved characters in the Port William membership, and that would be Ptolemy Proudfoot and Miss Minnie Quinch. And so Ptolemy is a humble farmer. He's a huge man. He probably weighs 300 pounds, might be 6'4". I mean, he comes from a lot of large people. The Proudfoot family, the Proudfeets, are apparently, just very, very lumbering folks, very strong. And in fact, they at their family gatherings, they wrestle for fun after they eat, because that apparently aids in digestion. I'll take their word for it. But he's a humble man. Like Wendell Berry points out very early in the story that Tall has 98 acres for his farmland, and it never really was something that he wanted to do to get the extra 2 acres to make an even 100. That didn't matter to him. And Minnie Quinch, she is. I should also say that Tall he's a bit of a teddy bear. He's a big man, but he's got tender feelings. He's got a big heart. Back to Minnie. So Miss Minnie Quinch is the school teacher for the one room schoolhouse. She is very intelligent, and she's very put together. And both of them reach their mid-30s or so as single, and so they both just been so busy with their lives, they just didn't ever settle down. And with this story, like they notice each other because it's a small town. You can't help but notice each other to some extent, at least have some idea who people are. But Toll realizes like he needs to let Minnie know how he feels, and the way he decides to do that is what ground this story covers. This song story covers. It gets remembered as one of the stories that the people of Port William remember and tell over again for years to come. And it's called The Ballad of Tall and Minnie. And here it is. Ptolemy Proudfoot, a mountain of a man, humble and honest and in touch with the land. Gotta serve the work, do the best that you can, oh, so far as it goes. Miss Minnie Quinch was tiny and petite, smart as a whip and quick on her feet. Gotta serve the work, teach the kids, take your seat, oh, so far as it goes. But he felt beneath her notice, and she didn't know he cared. But a remedy would find them in a story they could share. Oh, when the frost is on the pumpkin and the leaves are burning red and the fields are ripe for harvest and a chill is in the air. Told he got his courage up to go. Harvest Fest where the town would all know. Minnie and her students were the stars of the show. Oh, so far as it goes. His big heart leapt with fear and delight to see Miss Minnie, and he froze at the sight. A cake of her making just as lovely as a bride. Oh, so far as it goes. But he felt beneath her notice, and she didn't know he cared. But a remedy would find them in a story they could share. Oh, when the frost is on the pumpkin and the leaves are burning red and the fields are ripe for harvest and a chill is in the air, then a heart just may be open to a love both pure and true, to a kindness more than kind, and a remedy finds you. Oh, auction time came for Miss Minnie's cake. Toll's big heart within him quaked. 5 1/4, 10, Toll spake. Oh, so far as it goes. Miss Minnie's heart staggered and swayed. Toll looked at Minnie, found words to say. Might I see you home? You certainly may. On and on they would go. When the frost is on the pumpkin and the leaves are burning red and the fields are ripe for harvest and a chill is in the air, then a heart just may be open to a love both pure and true, to a kindness more than kind, and a remedy finds you. Oh, all right. A couple things I'd like to point out about that. One, I didn't mention beforehand, but you probably figured out from listening to the song that the way that Toll decided to make his feelings known was to attend Harvest Fest, this event at the school where the kids were sharing poetry and other things, reading passages of famous stories and things like that, basically showing off their knowledge. But Toll he didn't attend generally because he didn't have any children. And anyway, so he felt awkward, especially we went up in this room full of women at one point, and all the guys were outside, and he couldn't hide because he's huge. And anyway, but there was an auction, and so Toll saw Miss Minnie, and he also saw, well, he saw her there, of course, but then he also saw this cake of this table of baked goods, and there was a cake that was perfect, and so just majestic. And it turns out that that was something that Minnie had made, and when he saw that, he felt the same way he did about Minnie. He wanted to defend it with his life, and so he way overbid in the auction, but it clearly made an impression, and it goes well for them, for Toll and Minnie. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is the fact that think of their statures and think of their names. Tall, or Toll, but Tall, Proudfoot, he's tall, and Minnie is miniature, she's diminutive. Anyway, it's a little on the nose, but it's kind of a wink and a nod from Wendell Berry with the naming of those characters. So this next song is called 1934, and it is set in, you guessed it, 1934. It's based on a short story called The Solemn Boy. And this is an example of seeing characters in more than one portion of their lives. Like this happens 26 years after the events of A Consent, which was the name of that second story. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. So this one, Tommy Proudfoot and Miss Minnie, they've been married for years, and it's near the end of harvest season, and Toll is going out to his field to the one truly good patch of land that he owns. It's a little far flung, a little farther away. So he's finally getting to harvesting the corn there. It's kind of cold outside, and he sees these strangers, which usually most of the people he sees around in this little town, this rural community, he knows. But he sees them and gives them a word of welcome. And what unfolds next is what I'm going to share in the song. This is called 1934. The week after Thanksgiving, one cool November morn, I was braced against the snow, late in 1934. The path home over Cotman Ridge, the wagon strained with corn, the horse's breath in clouds of white, the dream of getting warm. Two appeared as made of wind, a stranger and his son, poorly dressed against the weather, two hunched and ragged souls. In so pleasant a place, you don't expect to see a boy so solemn for his age, and a weathered man who turned and barely nodded when I'd say, "Have you a home?" We arrived at home and table. My wife brought biscuits and beans. They applied themselves, not looking up from the boy, still not a peep. But it happened, I spilled the buttermilk, and the whole environment changed. The boy laughed a free and hearty laugh, and we all did the same. Ooh. In so pleasant a place, you don't expect to see a boy so solemn for his age, and a weathered man who turned and barely nodded when I'd say, "Have you a home?" My wife and I were no longer young, no child of our own. We sent the boy with his father, with a coat to keep him warm. They say when you help a stranger in a needy place and low, you could be entertaining angels and not know. called 1934, based on a story called The Solemn Boy. I truly appreciate you tuning in and watching. You're paying attention, and attention is one of the most precious commodities you could possibly pay. I read recently, it was a quote by Simone Weil. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. I think that's beautiful. So thank you for being so generous. And next up is a song called Making It Home. Oh, before I leave 1934 completely, I highly recommend checking out the story, the spilling of the buttermilk that I referenced, because it's pretty like heavy and like ominous. Not ominous. It's a heavy and serious kind of song, right? But then it's disrupted with this spilling of buttermilk. So Tall, just trying to amuse the company, especially the boy, advises the boy that you should always drink from. He holds up his cup of buttermilk and says you should always drink from the near edge of the glass and not from the far edge. So he drinks from the near edge normally, and then he puts his lips up to the far edge and ends up dumping the buttermilk right down his shirt, and then looks as astonished as anyone about it. So it is it's a laugh out loud moment in the book. I recommend checking it out. And it does break the ice, and everyone does start, the strangers do start talking a little more and become a little less strangers. So that said, this next story takes us a few years forward into 1945. Here we're introduced to Berry, Arthur, I call him in the song, and he ends up serving in the military in World War II. He's kind of old for a soldier, maybe pushing almost 30. And I don't remember the precise age, but you can look it up in the book. So he's serving in France in some pretty dire circumstances. He's in combat, and at one point the young man who's serving along with him, like they're stationed where they are, and this blast happens, and his comrade is killed, and Art himself wakes up in an infirmary, and a nurse tells him, "Looks like the war is over for you, soldier." And so just before the end of the war, actually, he gets sent back home, and so basically then he's transported to a neighboring city. I think it's Hargrave, which is near Port William in these Port William stories. It's like the sort of the big town. It's still small, but it's nearby. So he goes there. I'm rambling, sorry. But so he's dropped off there, and he could wait till the next day to take the bus home. But he decides to walk the rest of the dozen or so miles to get back. And so he gets some time to process through things. And that's where this song picks up. So here it is. It's called Making It Home. Arthur was a man before he was a soldier, and he was a farmer before he was a man. 12 miles on foot, but he was done with marching. He was only walking. The war was over for him. And his life grew back around the wound. He was making it home. Oh, after 3 years gone, making it home. Oh, now it won't be long, making it home. Though he'd been a stranger, walked in a strange land, now the war fell away. A warm light washed over that rode through the valleys, geography and story, and sang a morning song. And his life grew back around the wound. He was making it home. Oh, after 3 years gone, making it home. Oh, now it won't be long, making it home. Arthur saw his father, and he watched his brother working in their field. They hadn't caught sight of him, the shaking hands and laughing, after all the asking after. Our own that was gone is come back again. Our own that was gone has come back again. That's called Making It Home. It's named after the story that it's inspired by, I should say. And again, it's set in 1945. So we've covered a lot of ground from 1888 to 1945 at this point. And before I leave this song, I just wanted to, I would encourage you to check out the full album. It's called A Hard History of Love. And it's a collection of songs like you're hearing, and also essays, which the stage banter, so to speak, in this concert is approximating, but listen, you'll see what it's about. There's also a poem at the end that I'll explain, because I'll share that to close our time as well. So, as I mentioned, and you should check out the full version because of the wonderful, lush strings arrangements that are going on in that. That part was recorded after I'd come back home from Western New York from Old Bear Studio. It's recorded in the engineer's studio in Rochester. So all that to say, I hadn't heard those strings parts. So it's really cool to be able to, it was a cool surprise when I listened to the mixes and those were there. Well, I knew he had played them, but I hadn't heard them. So it was wonderful. All right, here we go. This last song is called The Way We Are. It's based on a story called The Wild Birds. And my approach for all of these stories thus far has been essentially to paint the picture of what's happening in the story. They're story songs. This one's a little bit different because it's the story it's based on. I really felt like I would have needed more than the space of a song to give you the context for you to understand why what's happening is important. But generally speaking, I will tell you that the character Burley Coulter, who I will say was one of the boys in Miss Minnie's class in the 1908 story A Consent. He's an old man at this point. He's deciding who's going to inherit his land. He hadn't married, so that's a whole other story of its own. But so he's visiting his friend Wheeler Catlett. Yes, his friend's name is Wheeler Catlett. He's a farmer and a lawyer, and he's talking about this, and he gets pretty philosophical at points. And he ends up saying something to the effect. Actually, I'll see if I can exactly quote it. He says, "The way we are members of each other, all of us, everything." And he goes on to say that it's basically not a question of who is in and who is not, but who knows it and who doesn't. And that can be seen in a lot of different ways. Whether we're talking, as a Christian, I see that as meaning every person is made in the image of God. So everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And there's a very real sense that we're a membership. And certainly with my brothers and sisters in Christ, we are we are a membership. We are, they shall know we are Christians by our love. So we are a membership in a sense as well. We are in this together. We're on the same team, on mission with our Savior. And it can mean a bunch of other things. It can mean like so much of what Wendell Berry is meaning by membership. He's talking about the community of people in a place that invest in each other and care for one another and love each other. And they love their neighbors as Jesus commanded. So, and he encourages us to do. So all of that is rolled into this. And this is called The Way We Are. And I'll share it with you here. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the bright sadness, the humble madness, the sacred gladness. Welcome to the breath and silent light, the dawnward passing night, the bittersweet fights. The way we are, we're members of each other, all of us, everything. Together we'll see many seasons, joy in spite of reasons, a love that endures anything. Welcome to the root systems, the frail and winsome, the ancient wisdom. Welcome to the faithful and the true, the glance and rear view, the quiet rescue. The way we are, we're members of each other, all of us, everything. Together we'll see many seasons, joy in spite of reasons, a love that endures anything. Wild birds sing their song, a hint of hope in the morning. The wild flowers worry not, their maker brings joy in the morning. The way we are, we're members of each other, all of us, everything. Together we'll see many seasons, joy in spite of reasons, a love that endures anything. We're members of each other, all of us, everything. Together we'll see many seasons, joy in spite of reasons, a love that endures anything. That song is called The Way We Are, and hope you've enjoyed this time together. And I want to close out this time with a poem called Gleanings. And it's so titled because a few years ago I read through Wendell Berry's collected poetry, and it's beautiful. The Sabbath poems, the Mad Farmer poems. There's in one of those, there's a quote that I have in my office on a little board. It says, "Be joyful though you've considered all the facts." It's humorous, but it's also a genuine challenge, especially in certain times. But all that said, I decided after I'd read of John Mark McMillan doing something like this as a sort of a writing prompt for himself, he would read poetry and then free write a few pages. I decided to do sort of my own personalized version of that, where as I was reading through Wendell Berry's poetry, I wrote somewhere between a paragraph and a page each of the times. And so basically every day for, I don't know, a year or two. And because it took a while to read through all of his poetry. It might have been less than a year. Anyway, so I skimmed over those. That had been a few years before I recorded the album. I skimmed over those and picked out some of the best bits, and wrote them down. And so during the week of the recording sessions, I took those and looked around me and composed a poem. And here it is. It's called Gleanings. Each still sliver of March snow adorns the good earth in a membership and not alone. So we are members, one of another, in our shared life of quiet work, we, sisters and brothers. A canticle of love and pain and dignity, to go by singing, to go by laughing, to go by lighting on me. In this elegy, this hard history, of this love and loss and cost, of this shared presence, this holy mystery. I'll leave you with that as a blessing. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Fieldmoot, for having me. My name is Matt Wheeler, and I hope that we cross paths down the road. Take care.